Alumni Hall, where you'll find officially licensed FSU gear for the entire family, including brands like Nike and Champion, plus great gifts for your favorite Seminole and home decor, too. Miss some of the old Seminole throwback logos? Check out our College Vault collection. Shop online at alumnihall.com and let our great customer sales team ship to you within days. Or pick up in store in Tallahassee. You'll find us in the Miracle Plaza Shopping Center on Thomasville Road. Students and military get 10% off in store, and Osceola subscribers get 20% off in store and online with their digital membership cards. Alumni Hall. It's the Osceola's Seminole Sidelines. For more on the Seminoles, including Osceola's coverage from veteran Seminole insiders, message boards, Osceola virtual happy hours, and more, go to theosceola.com.
Hello and welcome to another edition of the Osceola's Seminole Sidelines podcast, presented by Alumni Hall, your source for officially licensed FSU gear for the entire family. Please visit Alumni Hall at alumnihall.com or at their Tallahassee store, located at 1817 Thomasville Road. My name is Pat Burnham, host of Seminole Sidelines, and joining me today to discuss FSU's season-ending 24-21 loss to Florida are Osceola publisher Jerry Cutts, Osceola managing editor Bob Ferrante, Osceola recruiting analyst Charles Fishbein, and Osceola football analyst Mark Salva. But before we get started, I'd like to remind our Osceola subscribers to log on to the Osceola and click on the Alumni Hall ad to receive your 20% discount code on online purchases this holiday season. All right, guys. Well, we all went into Gainesville on Saturday, very hopeful of Florida State securing its sixth win and bowl eligibility against Florida Gators, who were out head coach Dan Mullen. We did not know what kind of effort the Gators would give after watching them play against Missouri the week before. But ultimately, in what was a sometimes ugly, undisciplined, and very long game, that at one point Florida State was 3 scores out of, raced back to make it a 3-point game with about a minute and a half left, had a chance to onside kick to try to get the ball back and make a last-ditch effort to win the ball game. Unfortunately, that failed. FSU fell to 5-7 and finished off its second season under Mike Norvell. Guys, start with you, Mark. You've played in that game many times. Just give me your overall thoughts on the game itself.
It's been a while since I've been more disappointed in a game than that game there. There were so many opportunities for us just to take that game by the scruff of the neck, and we just didn't do it. 3 turnovers in the first half, opportunities to score. I mean, at one point it was, 7-7, and we had the ball. That last play of the first half, 6 seconds. I'm thinking to myself, run it for 5 more yards, get down real quick, call timeout, kick a field goal, because we were on that edge of the field goal limit, right? So Travis takes off and runs and has no awareness of the clock. If he would have got down after he missed the first one and called timeout real quick, we might get 3 points right there. I think that right there might have been the play of the game, because that was points. Even though, you think about the muff, that was a 14-point turnaround too. But if we get those 3 points right there, we're going into overtime, right? So that was a big play. Just opportunities like that. We pin them back and we hold them 3 and out, and then the muff happens. We have in that drive, we had them 3rd and 21, and 3 missed tackles, and they get a first down. I mean, there's just so many opportunities for us to take that game over. And when I look back on it, I think back on it. To me, on it, we got out physical. They ran the ball harder. They tackled better. They were more physical up front than we were. It pains me to say that, but we got out physical during that ball game, and that to me is unacceptable in terms of how we came out and we just weren't flying around, I guess.
Yep. Jerry, what about you? What were your thoughts heading into the game and coming out of the game?
I agree with Mark that we did get out physical. We got beat on both lines of scrimmage. It was really clearly Florida dominated it. I had thought, Mark, that we would you expect to have Travis run an RPO, and that he will establish a threat, and that kind of opens up the running game. But when he got hurt and went out, and we come in with Mackenzie on the second series, and he's no threat to run it. And then we come out with Rodemaker, and we never tried to establish him as a threat to run it. And they were just teeing off on our tailbacks. I thought that it was that was why they were dominating the line of scrimmage. But when Mackenzie came back into the game, it didn't change. They continued to stuff our running backs.
You mean Jordan Travis?
Travis.
Yeah. What did I say?
You said Mackenzie.
Oh, Mackenzie. Yeah, there you go. So when Jordan comes back into the game and he rushes for 104 yards, but they still were teeing off on our running backs. I mean, we couldn't pee a drop.
No, we didn't block him very well. I mean, it's not like we didn't have a hat on everybody, because went back and looked at it, and we had guys on guys. They just pushed us back. They just were more physical than we were. The linebackers had free run. I mean, they were, we get on double teams that couldn't get second level. I mean, defensive ends on the backside, tight ends not able to cut them off and running down the line and making a tackle. I mean, it just wasn't very good execution in the running game. And let me say this too. I wasn't a big fan of the plan, honestly. I mean, and I'm really going to go after play calling. I'm not saying the play calling was bad. What I'm saying is I think the plan, and I don't know if that was a function of they weren't sure what they were going to get, because I think that's probably part of it. So we were a little more generic in our game plans. But we did, like last week at Boston College, we had a lot of differing personnel groups, shifting motions, and we didn't do a whole lot of that, this game. And so I don't know if that was a function of, not sure of what they were going to get based on who was calling the game, and having lost their coordinators and their head coach, and just some indecision about what they were going to get. And if they didn't get what they were expecting, I don't know about that either. But I just wasn't a fan of the plan. If that makes sense.
And there's one other thing I was going to add, Pat, and it was one of our keys to the game, is emotion, controlling our emotion and playing with poise. In that stadium is easier said than done. And we did a horrible job of that. I don't know if you all saw it prior to kickoff, but the Florida players came over to our bench and were taunting our guys. And they just sort of controlled the emotion. And I think they had us responding to them throughout the game. And we did not need to be responded. But I thought we had done a great job against Miami on our home field, and we did a very poor job of it against Florida on their home field.
Yeah, I didn't think. I thought with the discipline that we have seen Mike run his practices with, I thought that they would have handled that particular situation pregame before. With the Gators a little bit better, and I certainly did not expect us to get caught up in some of the stuff that they did during the game. Like I said, there were before we started recording, there were a couple of penalties that weren't caught on either side that could have been personal fouls because people were losing their composure. But to get back to what you guys were saying about running to win, we've always known that Florida State is better when Jordan Travis is a part of the running game, but not when he is the focal point of the running game. And Bob, you have beat this drum since probably preseason, a run to win. Florida State had 59 yards running outside of Jordan Travis. Now the Gators weren't much better. They had 104 yards outside of their quarterbacks. So neither team necessarily established a run, but what we said coming into the game was the team that ran the ball better would give itself a better chance to win the ball game. And that's exactly what happened. Now, obviously, I thought Florida State would run the ball better going into the game. Bob, what did you think about just what I call the traditional running game, the running backs running the ball, not the quarterback?
Yeah, I thought, coming in, Florida was 71st in the FBS against the run. It looked like a game where Florida State could run. Again, both Jordan and, to your point, traditional with a guy like Corbin or Ward or Toafili. There were a couple of times there, I think, Pat, I turned to you on Saturday, where Toafili ran it twice between the tackles. And I thought that's not the guy to be running physically between the tackles. That's the guy to be bouncing it off tackle or you're catching a pass out of the backfield. It felt like a curious couple of plays there, back-to-back plays. This was a game where I thought Florida State had to run. That's what you hang your hat on. That takes the pressure off Jordan Travis. It didn't get done. And the other big one was just the special teams gaffes, to me, just added up. And that punt return from Monteria, it didn't seal their fate, but it opened up the door to a defense that I think played its butts off, trying to keep Florida out of the end zone and really doing a good job with the takeaways, quite honestly. But what do you hang your hat on as Florida State? You have to run. You have to play clean on special teams. You have to get after the quarterback and get some takeaways on defense. And we just didn't see enough of those three things, in my view.
Yeah, and we can get into this. Next week we're going to come in and kind of do a final impressions of the entire season. But you mentioned special teams, and to me that was the one phase of the three that did not get continually better as the season went on. But certainly that was a key play in the game. Should have been. Now I hope most people do not know that punts are very difficult to catch. I don't know if you've ever tried to catch one. I know I have. I know that I could not have been a punt returner even if I'd been fast enough to run away from everybody. But it's very hard. But that should have been an easy – I mean, it was a 60-something yard punt. He had no pressure on him. Now, obviously, you're looking at spin and wind and all those type of things. But that was a big play. Fish, kind of give me your overall thoughts on the game.
The number one thing that disappointed me is – when you go back and look at the Florida State Miami game, you look at the games they've played the last 4 or 5 weeks, I don't think they matched Florida's intensity out of the gate early on. There was something missing, I thought, this week. It just didn't seem like that. I don't know if it was a focus thing, if it was just intensity. It just seemed like Florida had more intensity and wanting to win this game more. And that showed up throughout the game. And two, the one thing that really stood out to me was just physically, Florida looked like the more impressive team. Up front, they look bigger. They look bigger at all the positions. And that's one thing I think has been overlooked during the year because Florida State's played so well against all these other teams. But I thought it showed up for the first time. I thought physically they were overmatched in a game where they haven't been all year.
Well, they had a lot of Jermaine Johnson-looking guys on their side of the ball.
That's what I'm saying. We had Jermaine Johnson. They had their 1D tackles listed at like 280, 285. The kid looked like he was 340.
Number 6 you're talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah, he was a good-looking kid. There's no doubt.
Well, I mean, they're a junior, senior laden team too.
Yep.
And we're a sophomore, freshman, redshirt, sophomore laden team. So, I mean, they're a little further ahead, obviously, roster-wise than we are, and that definitely showed up. I agree with this, Fish. I made that comment in the first quarter. I'm like, I think we might have tried to stifle the crap talking and all that stuff maybe a little too much. Where we came out, it looked like a little flat. You're right. We did not match the intensity.
Yeah, you might be right, Mark, and maybe the trying to win 5 out of 6 out of your last 8 ball games to go to a bowl. Maybe that was a little bit too much. Like Coach Bob used to say, no matter who you play, it's hard to get run on all cylinders for 12 straight weeks. So you may be right on that. Now, Bob, you had mentioned, I think Fish, you had mentioned how hard the defense played, and it did, and it had done an excellent job on the second half of the season improving. But to me, the real critical situational part of the game was third down, where Florida was 11 of 19 on third down with 2 quarterbacks that, quite frankly, are not very good quarterbacks. And they're young or not very good, one of the two, and maybe a combination of both. But Emory Jones made some really helped keep Florida State in the game with just some ill-advised passes. But 11 of 19 on third down, 7 of 8 on third down opportunities on drives in which they scored. So it tells you, Mike talks about it being a money down. It certainly was for Florida, including, to me, the backbreaker was you had Florida back towards its 40-yard line and not able to kick a field goal. And Anthony Richardson converts a 3rd and 21 on what I believe was his first series in the ball game after Emory Jones got pulled. But Fish, I'll let you start with the defense and third down.
So, Pat, on that 3rd and 22, that was actually about a 10-yard pass. And it
3 missed tackles.
3 missed tackles on it.
Yeah, I count them.
Yeah, and I had 2, but if you say 3, it very well was. So, that was very discouraging that the defense didn't make that.
And that was when we had pinned them back, right? We had
right
pinned them back, and then we had the muff punt. And you think about that turnaround. I think we were down 10-7 right there, right? And we're getting ready to get the ball at even with the 60-yard punt on the -40, still a short field. And, we have a chance to go 14-10 right there. And instead it's now
17-7.
17-7. I mean, that was a killer.
Yeah, not that it matters, but they scored on third down. It was 3rd and goal, but they scored on third down. I mean, it was just for whatever reason.
Yeah, but 3rd and 21. I mean, we stop them there.
Oh yeah.
I mean,
they're punting.
Yes, exactly. Yes, that to me, that was of all of the third downs. And listen, we could probably go back and say every single one of them were critical, but that one certainly was because it eventually led to a touchdown. And listen, with 2 offenses that were struggling to run the ball and did not have great quarterback play from a passing standpoint. But
to me, defensively, that was the first time in about 3 or 4 weeks where we are always about a step behind, right? We didn't really anticipate what they were going to do very well, like we had the past several weeks, against Miami and against Boston College. I mean, we were all over everything, contested catches, tackle immediately, Saturday, they're getting balls in the flat and turning upfield, getting the shoulder square, and then we're missing tackles or getting run over for 3 or 4 extra yards. I mean, we were always a step behind defensively. And that was the first time that's happened in a couple of weeks.
Yeah. Listen, I agree with you. I'm not sure that I don't want to say didn't play with the same intensity because I don't know that that's true, but it didn't look like they had does energy sound better? It didn't look like they had the same energy, and I'm sure these guys showed up a heck of a lot more than what I'm seeing.
I don't think these guys ever played in Gainesville, have they?
No.
Most of these guys, right? And so
both of these guys have not.
Yeah, and the last time this team was in Gainesville, it was a track meet. So, that was always going to be tough. It was always going to be tough going in there, even though it was a noon game. Just look at Auburn, Alabama. Going away to your rival is tough. Ohio State, Michigan. I mean, going away to your rival is tough, and we just were not. I don't know if we weren't equipped or we weren't mentally prepared for what it really was. I mean, let's face it. This is staff's first time down there too, right? Yeah. So there's a lot of extraneous things that maybe were not factored into the preparation. And maybe a little prepared. Hopefully, again, everything with this team is a learning experience. They're so young, and the staff is first time through. So, I'm not saying I'm giving them a pass, but I am saying that, and it's not an excuse, but it may be a reason.
Yeah, exactly. I was in the stands for that game, and I can tell you the stands were probably 85% full. Florida State had a late rush on tickets, and we filled our allotment of 7,500. There were a lot of Seminoles there, but that was very clearly a partisan home crowd for Florida. And that's just, it's almost like going into Clemson, but more intense because, your opponent has gotten himself up for you. Anytime you put Florida and Florida State players on the field, they're going to be up. They're going to play their best game in that game. And I thought Florida did a great job of being ready to play that game.
Yeah, I thought they were a lot more dialed in with everything that is going on around that program, plus what goes on around the transfer portal and all that. I was a little bit surprised that they came out that focus. I think you got to give credit to that staff for holding all those kids for another 7 days and keeping them focused. But, as disappointing as the loss was, and we'll get into this more next week, but as disappointing as this was, FSU's down 24-7. And I remember us talking, particularly after week 3, when it was an 0-3 start, and we were looking for positive things to talk about. because I think we were kind of in, oh God, here we go again. It's a repeat of 2020. We noticed that in Notre Dame and to a lesser extent in Jacksonville State, but certainly in the third game and the fourth game. And I think go back to the Wake Forest game when they were down and they were getting outplayed against Wake Forest. There's no doubt about that. It was the worst game that FSU played all year, but we never saw the quit in the team like we had the previous 2 and 3 years. And that same trait, and it may be the biggest story coming out of this season, is not the schedule, the results from the schedule, and we talked about that in the preseason and even early in the season. But it was one of the things I took away from it. Of course, you want to take some positivity away from a game, even though it doesn't go your way. But one of the biggest traits we saw this Florida State football team and Mike Norvell's second year, whether you want to call it determination, grit, will to fight, never die attitude. They were down 24-7. As bad as the offensive had played for the first 3 quarters, it totaled almost 45% of its total yardage in the fourth quarter to come back and make it a 3-point game until the obviously faulty or false onside kick that went totally awry. I still need to go back and watch that again just to make sure I saw it. Make sure Charlie Brown or Lucy was not on the field pulling that ball out from underneath him. But I mean, guy and Jerry, you and I have talked about this a lot. But when we came into this season, we didn't know what kind of record this team was going to have, and there were so many questions at quarterback, at offensive line, at linebacker, in the secondary. We wanted this team to be a team that the fan base could be proud of, and then it looks like they're going to get their butts handed to them against the Gators, and so here they go, fighting right back in the fourth quarter. Mark, I'm going to start with you. I know you're disappointed in the outcome, as we all are, but can you talk about what you take away from that fourth quarter?
Well, the team obviously has a lot of pride. Going in the game, one of my keys obviously was that middle part of the game where we always seem to have a lull. I don't know what it is, but we always seem to have a little lull. But then the fourth quarter, we come back and we fight and we dig and we claw. That's the culture builder right there. And that's the thing that we all wanted to see, was it flip in the culture. We wanted to see this team fight, never give up, and even come back and win some of these games. And we got that all year consistently, even when it was at its worst. And to me, that speaks to the culture that Mike Norvell and that staff is building. It speaks to the leadership on that team, starting with Travis and the defensive line and just those leaders on that team. It speaks to them, their leadership. So that's something to build on moving forward. Again, we have a lot of young players, and that's the standard, is never quit. And if that's and it's established really well. So that's really something to build on moving forward. And it gives me pride as an ex-player, having that same, fight, determination, back in those dynasty years, we the same thing, right? That's Florida State football, and that's the pride of the program. So I'm encouraged moving forward is in terms of that. And like I said, once the roster gets better, the results will come, as long as we have that attitude.
Jerry, to Mark's point and mine, and Mark's obviously proud. I think we should be too. But is that me grasping at straws to find something positive coming out of this game, or is that the trait that we were looking for out of this team and knew that we would get in some form or fashion, as bad as that game was getting going into the fourth quarter?
It's been that way all year. This team is they just fight back. And in the fourth quarter there, when we were down 24-7. People were starting to leave, and I was like, man, this thing ain't over. They're going to come back. They're going to find a way to come back. And I wasn't surprised at all when they did. And I'll say this, as I felt proud at the end of the game, because that game 2 years ago would have been a 40-7 game. We would not have come back. And imagine how you'd feel right now if that game had ended 40-7. But it didn't. And as I was leaving the stadium, I ran into one of the Seminole Booster fundraisers who came in under me. And I got he and his wife together and said, get your heads up, go out there and do your job, because what you got is a head coach and a team that the fan base is proud of. This wasn't the record that anybody wanted, but it's a team that you can like. And I think that's essential to fundraising. And that's something we haven't had in 4 years.
Fish, your thoughts on the fourth quarter? And
I mean, it's disappointing, but I really, once again, I think that this team and the coaching staff have outperformed the talent on that roster. I've said it all year. I think the fact that if you look at the two teams, and honestly you're being objective here, the Gators had a more talented roster. And honestly, I think if you swap coaching staffs in that game, it's a blowout. I think Florida State would have got blown out in that game if you took Norvell and his staff and put them on that other side. So that's the good thing, is that these guys, this is what made Wake Forest so good for so many years, is that those guys were able to get a less talented team to compete in this conference. But Wake Forest doesn't have the ability to build a roster like Florida State has. So that's a positive sign moving forward, that if these guys actually get players, that you can see what level they'll perform at once they get those guys in there that are their guys, And I think that's a positive you could take from it, is as long as these guys are able to recruit at a high level, the coaching side will take care of itself. But that was the one thing I took away all year, is I just never felt like this was a very talented team. I thought they overachieved, honestly, in a lot of these games when they were playing these other teams.
yeah, I don't disagree with that. Now I'll ask this question now. I don't want to go back and do a review of the entire season. I want to do that next week. But listen, I think my preseason pick was 6-6. I believe everybody on here was within a game of that. I don't think anybody had them at 8. I don't think anybody had them at 4. Let me ask you this: at 0-4, and now we can talk about it because the season's over. But at 0-4, what did you? I mean, just being honest, what did you think the high level watermark for this team would be at the 0-4 mark at the end of September?
Oh, at that point, I was scrambling to look for a win. I mean, I saw UMass, and after that, I was like, it's less. I mean, I was scrambling to see a win at that point. But to Fish's point, and to the staff, to the credit to the staff, the one thing that I think is the most encouraging is that our players got better during the course of the year, right? I think the development of Jordan Travis as a thrower got better during the course of the year. The way the defense got better during the course of the year. Players were tackling better. Technique was better. These guys got better. They got developed. And I think it kind of speaks to moving forward, what we can look forward to Fish's point. Once the roster starts to flip and we start getting better players, the good news is these guys will make these players better.
Yeah.
Yes, let me ask this. Because this isn't going to be a complete roster flip. For us to become better, some of the freshmen that played a lot this year are going to have to become better. And we saw that happen during the year. I think I'm optimistic that some of those freshmen that got a lot of playing time this year are going to be outstanding players later.
Oh, yeah, I agree with Omarion Cooper and Malik McLean and Ja'Kai Douglas. And, you saw several guys continue to get better. I don't know that I don't know that they got better to a winnable level, but I thought even the offensive line, they didn't have the regular starting lineup for the last 2 games at least. I thought even some of the backups became more serviceable as the season went on. Mark, I'll ask you that question. Am I wrong there? Or
No, so here's the thing. Our best offensive linemen are sophomores. Rob Scott, Maurice Smith, Washington.
In
Washington. I mean, those are our best 3 offensive linemen, and Gibbons was a great get, for what we needed. But, their ceilings are only so high. As we get better players with higher ceilings, we'll get even better, and look, they're not the most physical guys. That's the next step for this offensive line. I was sitting there thinking that. I'm like, you know what? Okay, we stopped the bleeding offensive line wise. Our next step of this with this group is for them to get more physical, for them to impose their will during the course of the game. Because we never really got there with them yet.
Well, Mark,
yeah.
Mark, what do you agree though? Like you take Maurice Smith, who I was very high on coming out of high school. You know, I thought Maurice was a guy that really in past years, maybe his redshirt sophomore year starts, like having guys like that sit, develop, and not being forced to play right away. Because it's hard to develop those guys while they're playing. Like they need time to develop their bodies. Like Maurice is going to be, when Maurice is a senior, and it's good. It's a good thing that he's probably not going to be an NFL high draft choice, but I think he could be an all ACC conference type center his senior year once he has 3 years and he's able to develop. And that's a big difference when you're trying to win these games, is having a guy with 3 years of starts and he went through the growing pains, you know?
Yeah, I agree. This is a critical off season for those three guys, especially, you know, to get stronger, perfect their craft, you know, and really grow as a unit, because that really is an offensive line. That's so key too, is that those guys are a unit, that they know each other intimately. And that's such a key. So I mean, that's the next step for these guys, you know, and we need to keep influxing, you know, more guys in there and getting more physical, getting bigger, getting stronger. I mean, that's going to be a key, because what Norvell likes to do, what they like to do, running the ball, that's the requirement for this team, is that offensive line has got to be a dominant force.
Yeah,
So Mark,
I believe Givens has another year to come back if he so chooses. So you're right now the only guys running out of eligibility, if I'm correct, are Devontae Love Taylor and Babion. I think even Brady has a chance to come back if he wants to.
Brady Scott still has an extra year if he wanted to. I don't know if they'll bring him back, but he definitely has another year. So,
well, obviously we've talked a little bit about next year, and I don't want to talk about next year for Florida State yet. I want to talk about next year in recruiting, and I kind of want to start with where we started in Gainesville. Florida State obviously is hitting the road. The coaches hit the road as early as 6 a.m. on Sunday. But on Sunday afternoon, Florida announced that they're hiring Billy Napier. Fish, kind of tell us what you know about Billy Napier as a recruiter, and what do you anticipate as far as him putting a staff together? Does that make Mike Norvell's challenge harder than it was against a guy like Dan Mullen, who is perceived not to be a guy that really put a lot of detail into recruiting?
Yeah, you know, I've told you guys my opinion of Dan Mullen. I thought he was an elite level X's and O's coach. You know, there's always that argument, is the talent more important or coaching? This is one time that the Gators and their administration thought that the recruiting was more important. Dan, for some reason, I think he liked recruiting, but he definitely did not like recruiting the state of Florida. And the difference between him and Meyer is Meyer was able to pull the Percy Harvins and the Aaron Hernandez and those elite guys that maybe are in the state of Florida, but they're out of the state. That was the difference, is he wasn't able to get those difference makers. And that's why they weren't competing with Alabama and Georgia. I think Napier will be a better recruiter, but I think they're going to lose something from the exit. So they basically gave up some X's and O's and coaching stuff for probably a slightly better recruiter. I don't know how good Napier is, because we've never seen him recruit at this level. I mean, when he was at Clemson and Alabama, those schools kind of recruit for themselves. It'll be interesting. I think that right now, Norvell has the edge as far as a recruiter. I think he's already proven that. It's going to be interesting if Billy Napier could close that gap right away. So.
No, this probably won't make people feel any better, but he was the recruiting coordinator at Clemson for a couple of years while he was there as a very, very young coach.
Right.
Mark, what do you think about the hire and how it impacts Florida State? Obviously more on the recruiting side of things than the field. We'll find out. That'll take care of itself on Saturday, 363 days from now.
Yeah, the little bit I do know about him, that is his reputation as a I'll just put it this way, a savvy recruiter. Okay. So we'll see how that translates as a head coach. It's a lot different being an assistant and being the guy that's kind of coordinated as opposed to being the head coach.
So are you saying you're expecting small churches to pop up all over the state of Florida like they did in South Carolina?
We'll see. But, I'll just say this, it doesn't scare me, this hire. So I think I agree with Fish. I think you might lose something in terms of the experience that you had with Mullen in terms of, coaching at an elite level, at a high level with the X's and O's and the play calling and all that kind of stuff. I think you're going to lose a little something there. It'll be interesting to see who he brings in as his assistants, the kind of relationships he has with the kind of coaches that he has as friends and whatnot. So, stay tuned, but like I said, it doesn't really scare me so much. I like where we're at. I wouldn't trade Mike for just about anybody right now for what we need, for sure.
Bob, your thoughts on Napier and what you know about him? I mean, as a coach or a recruiter?
Yeah, I'll be honest. I don't think it was the massive hire that a lot of Florida fans were looking for. Having spent some time down in Gainesville with some in-laws who are big Gator fans, it didn't have that wow factor that I think the fan base was truly looking for when some big names were out there. And those big names are always kind of thrown out in coaching searches, and you think, could this be a Bob Stoops? Could this be his homecoming back to Gainesville? And we've experienced that. We know it's probably not going to happen just about anywhere outside of that temporary job he's going to take at Oklahoma. I think Napier is a good hire. I think time will tell how good of a recruiter he is. Who does he hire among assistant coaches to strengthen his recruiting ties within Florida? It's an interesting hire. It's not a coach with the last name M, and they've struck out on a lot of guys in a row with M. So maybe N for Napier is a guy who might win long term for them.
Jerry?
Yeah, I had the same experience with Gator friends around the state. They were looking for a lot bigger fish. And on Saturday evening, I was asked that question over dinner in Gainesville. Do you really think they're going to sign Napier? Who is this Billy Napier? And so I think the fans are a little discouraged by it, but they'll get over that quick. They'll start to tout him here shortly.
That probably means they hire the right coach.
Well,
Exactly.
I'll say this. Last I think it was last year, his name came out for a lot of jobs, and the thing was, he turned them down. He didn't turn them down. That's code for he didn't get the job, so he's I quit before you fired me. He's been in the market for a little while, and he got somebody to bite. It sounds like to me. That's kind of the way I read it.
Yeah. Well, listen, and the turnover's not over. I mean, listen, Lincoln Riley left to go to USC, so Oklahoma's open now. There's probably going to be a lot of trickle-down effect. It's going to be interesting to see how all these coaching turnovers affect the portal and recruiting in general. Fish, I do want to talk to you a little bit about that. Florida State coaches are on the road recruiting this week. Hit the road on Sunday. They've got 3 official visits scheduled right now for the next 2 weekends before early national signing day, which is December 15th through December 17th. They're bringing in Tyree West, the Georgia commit, this weekend, along with Aaron Hester, who has been committed from Florida State since this past spring, or actually last spring. And then, of course, bringing in Marquise Gilbertson, a junior college defensive back. Talk to us a little bit about Hester and West and what you've seen from them this year.
Yeah, I mean, Tyree West is a big piece because he's like we talked about it. They're not going to win big until they improve the offensive and defensive lines. This kid will provide a bit. He's a big body kid. He can move real well. He's an important piece as far as I'm concerned because I think he's more ready than the guys they already have committed to him at the D tackle position. I think he could probably come in and be in the depth chart next year and contribute. The other kid, Aaron Hester kid, I'm curious to see how he's developed. We saw him over the summer. He was a little smaller than we thought he'd be, especially with the other defensive ends. He's a guy that has all the talent, but they're definitely going to have to get him in the weight room and put some weight on. I don't think he has to go as far as Patrick Payton and George Wilson had to go. I think that if he could come in early in the spring, I don't know if he's a spring enrollee. I really think that could help push his development along and give him a chance to play as a freshman. But those are two important pieces. I know they're not, the O-line and the D-line aren't fan favorites all the time, but they're the most important recruits you could get outside the quarterback. So I think those two.
I get the impression West is kind of like a Derek Nottie type. Is that fair?
I think he's like a Derek Nottie type. I like him. He's, like I said, I definitely think he may be an inch tall. He may be a little taller than West. I mean, Nottie was about 6'1", but that was, he was a very productive player at FSU. They could use a Derek Nottie right now inside, especially if Cooper leaves and some of the, they don't have a ton of talent at that position right now. So.
Yeah, you mentioned the front four and the front five on offense. I do want to ask you about Armello and Marvin Jones Jr., obviously two of the higher profile FSU recruits and really high profile recruits for any program that's starting them, recruiting them, two of the most highly sought after players in America. Any updates on either one of those two kids?
I was around a couple of the coaches in the area that know the family and everything with Marvin Jones. They think he's going to Florida State. I spoke to these coaches that have played against him this year, and they're just like everything about him. They believe that at the end of the day, Marvin's going to choose FSU. I think Armella, he wasn't – the one thing that's helped them out is he wasn't going to make his decision early. I think he's going to wait till the actual old signing day in February, and that just – it benefited them that LSU had a terrible season. And then on top of it, Alabama just ran out of spots. So – it helped them that they stayed there and they just waited their turn. And I think they're going to be the benefactors of Armella's commitment. I think Armella will wind up a Seminole on signing day.
All right. Another guy that's made some headlines today, Quayshawn Sapp, a 6'5", 320-pound offensive lineman committed to Florida State from Lee County, Georgia. It's going to take some more visits. Any reason for Florida State fans to be concerned about that one?
I think that's why they're on so many offensive linemen, that they knew this could possibly happen with a couple of them. I think they've done a very good job. They wanted to get 6 or 7 committed, knowing that if they end up with 5, they've met their number. So even if Sapp decides to go somewhere else, they'll have met their numbers. Armella's would be a key piece. He's better than all the linemen. I think Woody is the one kid, and I think Mark likes Antavius Woody. I think Woody is the one I want them to, I want them to keep him more. He reminds me a lot of Isaiah Wynn that played at Georgia and was an undersized guy, but played tackle, ended up a first-round pick. I think he's more important recruit than Sapp. Sapp's the guy that's going to take time to develop. And at the end of the day, that kid, if he wants to go somewhere else, that's his choice. But I think they've done a very good job of meeting their numbers, especially if Armella comes in. I know they're on a couple other old linemen, but they've done a very good job of making sure that they hit that mark of at least 5 this year, if not 6, on the O-line.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I think out of the 5 or 6 guys they've got committed on the offensive line, the only guy that's got a chance to play as a true freshman next year is Octavius Woody. I mean, we saw, as fired up as we were about the and I'm drawing a blank on Orr coming into this year. Orr was, as good as he was in high school, when he got on a college campus, he still had a long way to go, even with the situation as it was here.
I think Woody and Julian Armella are the two that have the best chance of playing as freshmen. Well, I
agree. If Armella signs, yes. I mean, that kid's very physically gifted. I mean, I watched him play in that early season game on ESPN against another national recruit, and he had his way with him probably more times than not.
I'm sitting here reading an article that just says Sapp has shut down his recruiting. He's not taking any more visits.
Well, that's changed since this afternoon.
Is that this afternoon? Okay, this is
on
21
Twitter
hours ago.
Yeah, on Twitter he posted that he shut it down.
Good. I heard he was taking visits. Good. That's good. We need to keep it if we can. All right, let's talk. Obviously, going to be a lot of coaching changes, and I'm not talking about the. Do you think that there's a chance that all this staff is back next year? And I'm just talking about with the massive amount of turnover in college football at the head coaching ranks. Does anyone think there will be turnover on the staff due to the massive amount of turnover, 21 openings in college football, including the jobs that have already been filled? Do you guys expect the staff to be back intact next year? This is more of a projection.
I personally don't think anybody's going to get fired. I think that
I'm not asking fired.
Yeah, I think that you could see David Johnson end up at LSU possibly because of his New Orleans connections, and maybe the next coach goes after him. I think there's a very good possibility that a couple of other coaches could find spots, but I don't see any of these guys leaving by being forced out. I think it would be more.
I was just talking about in relation to the.
I think Chris. Chris.
I was going to say the same thing. I think the only one might be Johnson.
Yeah, Chris Thompson coached is a Texas guy. They may go after him at TCU just because that's where his strengths are. And he's coached his whole career in Texas, but he is like Mike Norvell's right hand, like assistant head coach. So it's going to be tough for him to leave, but it wouldn't shock me if he went back to Texas.
I will share this though. So a good friend of mine, whose son is a sophomore prospect, was at the Miami game. And after the game, I thought this is pretty cool. They bring all the players up and they go in the meeting rooms of the positions, and the coaches come after the game and address the players and the parents. And, Alex Atkins sat there and said, and he told the kid, he goes, look, I'm at Florida State, and the only way I won't be, and I'm going to be totally honest, if the Dallas Cowboys come calling. He says, I'm here to see this out, and I think, from what I heard, other similar kind of things came out of the other rooms too. So it sounds like these guys are pretty committed to Mike, pretty committed to the program, unless, somebody's dream job, who knows what ambitions are for guys, whether it's going to the league or with some other, relationships. But it sounds like, I think for the most part, they'll be here.
Jerry or Bob, any thoughts on staff coming back next year? And again, I'm not talking about from performance or anything else of the team. I'm just talking about strictly from the amount of turnover that's going on in college football with 20-something new head coaches being tabbed. Do y'all see the whole staff coming back?
I would say like you guys have already said, you don't ever know when a coach gets a dream job and recruits you. I know, Pat, I had an interesting cup of coffee at 5 a.m. one morning with your dad, Brad Scott.
Thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah, when Brad Scott offered your dad the assistant head coaching job at South Carolina, and Wally couldn't turn him down. I mean,
the rest of his family could, and we did, and our votes didn't count.
But Mark, you were involved in that move to South Carolina, and it's exciting to help start up a new program. And just depending on who the head coach is that asks you, it can become enticing.
Yeah, it can. All right. Well, let's take a look. We know Florida and USC have been filled. Let's play a little fortune teller here. I'm going to name the school. You tell me who's the head coach there on February 3rd or whatever the National Signing Day is. LSU. Fish, who's your head coach at LSU?
Oh, man. I'll say Matt Rule.
I'm with you. I'm going Matt Rule. Jerry, coach at LSU.
I was surprised at the thought of Matt Rule. The guy's from New York City, man. New York City. From New York City.
Well, hey, he won at Baylor, and the other guy they're talking about is Brian Kelly. He's never lived south of the Mason-Dixon line either.
Listen, I think Brian Kelly would be a hell of a hire. Honestly, if I was LSU, I think it'd be a no-brainer. That's just my opinion. I don't know how you guys feel, but I think Brian Kelly would win a national title there.
Mark, LSU.
Bill O'Brien.
Oh, Lord. Bob.
I'm still the crazy one who will not believe until LSU hires somebody. I believe Jimbo is a candidate.
They just beat Jimbo Fisher.
I understand the optics of it.
I mean, do you realize he has like the number one class? It's not like, listen, when he was at Florida State, he bailed on the last class. So it's not like they're recruiting like he wants to be there,
Well, they didn't play Lincoln on Saturday night, I can tell you that.
Yeah.
I watched it in that game. Hey, it's he that is a coach of as the guy said it on television that night. He is the definition of average in the SEC this year. He's 4-4 in SEC play. That's how he finished the season. Yet the guy gets away, robs Texas A&M. Anyway, God Almighty, it just kills me. But anyway, all right. So Oklahoma opened up, which I think shocked everyone. I'm going Mark Stoops to Oklahoma from Kentucky. Who is, and I listen. I would almost say Bob Stoops, but I heard he was at Mom and Pop's or Mom and Dad's having Italian dinner tonight. So I think he's in Tallahassee, not Norman. I got Mark Stoops going to Oklahoma. Mark Salva, who do you have going to Oklahoma?
Yeah, that sounds good to me. I mean, it makes sense, especially with Bob being the interim.
Yeah, he could be setting the table. There's no doubt about that. Jerry, Oklahoma.
Wow. I don't have a pick. I don't.
All right, Bob.
I think they're stunned. Let me just say this.
I agree.
I mean, they're putting committee together today to try to figure out where do we go from here. That one stunned me.
Well, I'm just glad that Lincoln Riley is a man of his word and is not the head coach at LSU today.
Hey, I could tell you this, the LSU people, and I heard this 3 weeks ago, and my guy is about as tied into a program as you could be. He basically told me, Fish, Lincoln Riley is going to be the next head coach at LSU. When he said that, I was like, wow, like Lincoln may leave. Like if they're to that point that LSU honestly thought they were going to land this guy, Lincoln was already thinking of leaving. And I just think the thought of Lincoln going to the SEC, he's like, man, let me find the easiest way to win a national title. And I thought he made a good decision by going to SC. I think he's going to do a lot better there than Oklahoma will do in the SEC. I think Oklahoma, I think their fans are going to find out real quick that the SEC is not the Big 12.
By the way, if Texas had played in the SEC this year, they would have been a 2-win team.
They would have been a 2-win team, probably.
5-7 Texas Longhorns. That's like one of the most overrated programs in the history of college football.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, they're supposed to win 12 games every year, and they win 6 to 8 every year. It's crazy. Hey, Fish, I got to give you credit. And the reason I bring this up, because I have a friend of mine who loved to see Jim Harbaugh spurn his alma mater and go to an LSU or Oklahoma just because he's caught so much crap over the course of the last 7 or 8 years when he's winning 9 ball games a year. But he finally beat Ohio State in a blizzard at home. You're the only person on this podcast that call it. So if we had a crown to give away, you would get to wear it. How did you know Michigan was going to beat Ohio State last week?
I've got to be honest. I watched a lot of Ohio State games this year, and I was not like, I saw Oregon just run all over them. I did not think that I thought this was Ryan Day's worst team. Yeah, they blew out Michigan State. I wasn't impressed watching them this year. Penn State, if they had any offense, Penn State would have beat them. I mean, they literally, Ohio State got inside the red zone like 5 times and ended up going for it every time and not getting it. I just wasn't impressed with their team. I thought this was more of a finesse team than your typical Ohio State teams. I think Ryan Day is going to have to go back. And Ohio State they're still in the Big Ten. And they're just not a physical team anymore. They beat you with athletes and they run up big scores. But I just think if they get in a game with a team that's more physical than them, they'll lose. And I thought I watched Michigan play this year. They were more physical up front. Their defense was great. I thought their corners were really good. And it just seemed like this was the year, if any, that he was going to beat them. That was just my opinion. So.
All right. And one last thing on just the national coaching landscape. Luke Fickell so far has decided to stay at Cincinnati, which is curious to me. And I think there's got to be a reason for that. Probably another job that's not open right now. I'm hearing rumors that Ryan Day may want to go to the NFL. Do you think that's why Luke Fickell is still at Cincinnati, or because of the rumors of Brian Kelly going to LSU from Notre Dame?
I mean, I sat down with Ryan. I sat down with Fickell a couple of years ago, had lunch with him, and I just got the feeling that this guy's a Big Ten coach. I just don't think, he turned down the Michigan State job last year because it was like a mess. I think he really would have taken that job. I just don't see, he's not a Southern guy. There's some guys that can go and coach in the North and then come down South. I just think he'd be an odd fit down here. I just do. I don't think he could make the transition. I honestly think he would end up failing if he went to one of the Southern schools. I think he's just waiting for one of those Big Ten jobs to open up. That's just my opinion. So,
and hey, before we're all going to do our championship game week picks. I hope everybody knows who's in the championship. But Fish, we get to pat ourselves on the back because we've called the ACC championship game since week 3. We'll get in those picks later. But I do want to talk about a guy who had a really good day Saturday.
Jerry can't pick because he just piggybacked off us the whole year, so he can't pick.
We'll let him pick. We'll let him pick. Hey, one guy, before we get off, I do want to mention that this guy had a rough year. He's had a rough 3 years, really. But Mackenzie Melton won the Brian Piccolo Award, or co-winner of the Brian Piccolo Award, which is given to the most courageous football player in the conference. He had a tough day Saturday. He had really a tough go of it all season. We've all mentioned that he does not look to be the same player that he was and certainly was at UCF. Felt bad. Listen, I don't feel bad for many people. He threw a pass he shouldn't have thrown, and I'm getting way off the subject there. But just talk. I mean, whoever wants to take it, or everybody wants to take it. I was there at the game that Mackenzie Melton almost lost not only his leg but his life at. What he has done to me is it's the Alex Smith version of college football from a comeback standpoint. I hate it for the kid that he was never going to be the same player. I don't, and part of me wishes he had gone somewhere where there's a little bit better pass protection, but that's another story for another time. But listen, just talk about, Mark, you've been through injuries and things of that nature. You've seen guys get injured significantly. Just talk a little bit about Mackenzie Melton and what you think that took and what you think he added to this program over the course of the last year.
Yeah, I remember when we got the first word that he was coming and talked to you and your brother who was at UCF when he was there, and just what a great guy he was. And I go back to my previous comment about the culture change that we are in the middle of, and what it takes to not quit, but to prepare like a winner, right? To be to be a pro's pro, so to speak. And on defense, we got that with Jermaine Johnson, Keir Thomas, and some of that, right? On the offensive side of the ball, Dylan Gibbons came in from Notre Dame, and then we also got Mackenzie, who in that quarterback room, how he prepared, how he led, how his influence on the offensive side of the ball, and really probably through the whole team. I don't think you can overstate it in terms of modeling what good looks like in terms of preparation and how you do everything every day. Because that's one thing Mike always harps on. He harps on, how you do anything is how you do everything. And having a guy like Mackenzie come in and exert his influence and how he does things had to permeate through that whole quarterback room. And as you know, the quarterback is the leader of the offense, and by virtue, hopefully, of the team. I think that for us, we should be very grateful for him coming here and doing that and modeling that for us. Not only his fight coming back from the injury, what that took, but also, how he kind of led that team in terms of how to prepare.
Jerry and Bob, y'all saw him every day at practice. What do you guys think that he brought to this team? And do you think he had any role in the maturation of Jordan Travis, who we saw get a little bit better as a passer each and every week? What were y'all's thoughts on Mackenzie? Y'all saw more than anybody here.
I think he definitely pushed Jordan Travis every week. And Jordan learned how to push himself, I think, for 2 reasons. One, Devin Travis, his brother, being a pro athlete. And 2, a guy like Mackenzie pushing him each day on the practice field. You can't replace that kind of competitiveness and what it generated. I think Mackenzie has set himself up really, really well to be a coach. He's played for Scott Frost, Josh Heupel, Mike Norvell. He can be a coach just about anywhere, GA, analyst. That's probably his future, not the NIL space, which is what he's kind of dipped his toes into so far. But I think Mackenzie is the ultimate feel-good story. I'm a sucker for a player coming back from an injury standpoint type of story. He's a book. He's a 30 for 30. He's a podcast. His story is just whatever he wants it to be. And I think he can tell it one day, kind of in his view. The media, we've all told it, but I think he deserves a shot to tell that story one day in whatever format he chooses.
Yeah, and my understanding is he is playing in the Hula Bowl, obviously from Hawaii. So, but I'm like you, Bob. I do think we will find, and by January 15th or so, I think we will see Mackenzie Melton on a college football staff, be it in Tallahassee, Lincoln, Nebraska, Orlando, Florida, Norman, Oklahoma, or Knoxville, Tennessee. I think he will end up somewhere coaching football. We wish him nothing but the best. All right, guys, we're going to continue our tradition. And sometimes I think I'm the only one that really likes this drill, but I do. So as long as I'm the host, I'm going to play. So we're going to go through.
You're driving this train wreck, so yeah.
That's right. And nobody can take their eyes off a train wreck. So let's hope nobody can quit listening to one too. So all right, here we go. Friday night we got Western Kentucky, and I don't even know what conference this is, at University of Texas San Antonio, who is ranked number 22 in the nation. I'm just going to go start. Jerry, you're first on my we're going to go Jerry, Mark, Bob, Fish. That's how you are lined up on my screen.
All right, Western Kentucky.
Okay.
UT San Antonio.
Okay, Bob.
UT San Antonio.
Fish.
Well, the way UTSA got beat the other day, I don't see the coach is a great coach. I don't see them getting beat like that 2 weeks in a row. So I expect them to bounce back and win the game.
Yep, I'm going UTSA too. Okay, and a little bit better game. Number 11, Oregon versus number 19, Utah in the Pac-12 game in Las Vegas. Jerry?
Utah.
I'm gonna say Oregon doesn't get beat again, but not by them.
Bob?
Yeah, I'm absolutely torn on this one. This is a rematch of from October, right?
Yeah.
2 weeks ago.
A couple weeks ago, Utah
Okay.
hammered them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Utah beat them 2 weeks ago.
Okay, I'll go Utah again.
Yeah. It's tough to beat a team like that 2 times in a row. And the way they beat them, they physically beat them up front. I don't see Mario's team getting beat like that again. I think Oregon will come back and win the Pac-12 championship.
I think they're going to have some kind of PTSD from that game, and Utah's going to do the same thing to them again. I think they're going to get road graded. Okay, number 8, Baylor versus number 7, Oklahoma State in a game that could have significant impact on the college football playoff. Jerry, you got Baylor or Oklahoma
State. I like Gundy.
He's got a great head of hair, doesn't he?
I was gonna say I'm going for the fighting mullets.
Okay.
Oklahoma State.
I am you're going, Bob? Go, Bob.
Yep. That's it. Oklahoma State.
Fish.
I'm shocked that this guy hasn't gotten a head coaching job at a bigger school. I think Gundy is one of the best coaches in college football, and I'm impressed with what he's done this year. He actually has a defense this year, which he hasn't had in the years past. I expect Oklahoma State to take this one.
I do too, which means Baylor wins because we're 5-0. But yes, I agree. Hey, listen, that mullet would do great in Baton Rouge, by the way. He would. Yep. I mean, he looks like all those guys riding pickup trucks down near the coast of Louisiana.
Absolutely.
All right, we're going to skip unless somebody's got real interest in Utah State, San Diego State. I don't know enough about them, so I'm going to skip to the SEC championship game, which is Georgia versus number 3 Alabama. Jerry, who you got in the SEC championship game?
Georgia.
All right.
Yeah,
Mark?
I mean, Georgia had a cakewalk last week. Alabama 4 overtimes. That was a pretty intense game. You know, kind of reminds me like Florida having to play us and then going to have to play the SEC championship game and getting hammered. You know, I'm going Alabama. Georgia.
Yeah, I'm going Georgia too. I think Alabama. Every time we've seen them, they just look good, but suspect. Like they're very vulnerable. I think Georgia gets them.
Fish.
Georgia all year has been the top team. They have the best defense. I think Alabama is suspect running it this year. The last 2 weeks, I think they've rushed for less than 50 yards in both games. Without a run game against Georgia's defense, I expect Georgia to win this and win it pretty easily.
I will say this caveat, and I hadn't watched Georgia all that close, but I think Alabama might have the better quarterback, and that's usually.
Oh, well, they definitely have the better quarterback.
So that definitely could tip the scales big time.
Well, I think that Nick Saban gave his team rat poison for the pregame meal against Auburn, and that's kind of dumbing everything down. And I think Bama's going to pull the upset of the year and create all kind of chaos in the college football playoff. I'm going Bama. Houston at Cincinnati. Obviously, this is another big game because if Houston wins, the AAC gets nobody in. If Cincinnati wins, they've at least got a fighting chance, depending on how all the other games pan out. Jerry, you got Houston or Cincinnati?
Cincinnati.
This thing smells to me like it's going to work itself out to where no AAC team gets in the playoff. I'm going to go Houston. It just feels like that to me.
Well, maybe there's some ACC officials down there. Bob?
I'll go Cincinnati.
Fish?
I don't know. Cincinnati's been real good all year. I don't expect anything to change.
So you're going Cincinnati, and I'm going with Mark on Houston. All right. A game that we did not necessarily see before the season started in the Big Ten, we've got Michigan versus Wake.
No, Michigan versus Iowa.
Iowa.
Oh, I'm sorry, Iowa. Listen, I love Wake Forest. I'm already to the ACC championship game. My apologies. Michigan versus Iowa. Who you got, Jerry?
I tell you, my good friend is an Iowa guy, and so I've been watching them a little bit. I'd like to pick them, but I won't.
That was the best Lee Corso impersonation we've had all year. Mark?
I think Michigan has an Ohio State hangover, and not so fast, my friend. And I'm gonna say Iowa upsets them.
All right.
I think that's just a Michigan thing to do, right?
All right. Bob?
Yeah, I'm gonna go Iowa too. I think this is probably the upset pick with Michigan about a 10-point favorite, but it feels like they're ripe for an upset.
Fish?
You guys obviously haven't watched Iowa this year. Their offense is putrid. I don't even know how they made the Big Ten championship. They're not scoring on Michigan's defense. Michigan will win at best, at worst 10-0. Like Iowa probably won't score in this game more than 3 points. They are terrible on offense, guys.
Yeah, well, I am going to jump on the Michigan bandwagon, and I've got a surprise for you guys next week when we get to the college football playoff about my college football top four, which we'll get into after. We'll give ours regardless of what the committee gives them. But in an eagerly awaited game that Fish and I have been waiting on since September 21st, or whatever the third week of the college football season was, the ACC championship game. We're going to wake up and get to walk the picket line. We're going to get to watch Pitt and Wake Forest play on Saturday night. Got to get all these other games out of the way, get the ACC on the television. I'm really torn because I love Kenny Pickett and I love Dave Paulson. If they were playing on the same team, it'd be like the perfect combination. I mean, my heart is torn. So I'm going to let you guys pick first. Jerry, you got Pitt or Wake Forest?
My heart's with Wake. I'm the underdog guy. I want to see Wake win the title.
All right.
Yeah, I'm gonna go Wake. I'm gonna go Wake.
Bob?
I'll take the Fighting Dave Clawsons, the ACC Coach of the Year, Wake Forest.
Fish?
Hey, not since Bino Cook and Jimmy the Greek have we been so right on two teams going to a championship game. I'm going with Kenny Pickett and Pittsburgh. They're just too talented, especially at the wide receiver position. I think they're going to expose Wake Forest secondary. It will be a high-scoring game, probably like 45-40, but Pitt will pull it out.
Yeah. The reason I like Wake is because they can run the ball. Pitt's not as good running the ball. But Wake can't stop anybody, and they're going to have a hard time stopping Kenny Pickett and Jordan Addison. particularly if Pitt can do anything, run the ball. Plus, I've known Mark Whipple since I was a kid. He coached for the Arizona Wranglers. I don't know Dave quite as well. I do know him, so I'm going to go with Whipple and Kenny Pickett and Pitt to win the ACC. And I've written these down so we actually do have proof of who was right and who was wrong next week. Bob, before we go, a lot of other things going on around Florida State besides football, particularly basketball. FSU's got Purdue. Maybe before this podcast comes out. But tell us what all's going on around campus and a little bit about the Purdue game, which is the Big Ten ACC Challenge.
We've got a Tuck Talk podcast. Ari and I, we're gonna break down a little bit of FSU Purdue. Boilermakers are number 2 in the nation. They've got a lot of big guys, big, tall, athletic team, and it's not going to be the greatest of matchups for Florida State, since they've got 2 7-foot centers out with injury for this game. So it's kind of an unfortunate set of circumstances there. Of course, our hearts go out to Raekwon Evans. He's lost his brother. He will be, back in, I believe, in Montana for his brother's service. So Florida State will be a little bit shorthanded there. Big story, I think, that kind of goes under the radar, but we have to appreciate the soccer team back in the Final Four. I think it's like the 8th time in the last 12 years. So Florida State soccer will play Friday night against Rutgers in the Final Four, the Women's College Cup. And yeah, we've obviously got a lot of sports going on too. Women's basketball. Yeah, it's a busy time of year as we kind of wrap up 2021.
Yeah, it is kind of you go right from football into basketball, and then of course baseball's not shortly. Baseball's not far behind. It's obviously a very busy time.
You got football, recruiting, and spring football.
Yep.
You got, right?
Yeah, it's crazy busy right now. Well, guys, obviously we'll be back next week to talk a little bit more about Florida State, the totality of the 2021 season, and get into a little bit of what Florida State has coming back on its roster next year. Fish, we want to hit you next week up on what positions you think Florida State has to hit the portal in. So we'll talk a little bit about that. Obviously, there's going to be a whole lot more turnover in college football. We'll see how that affects Florida State, if any, either in recruiting or coaching or even the transfer portal itself. We think there'll be activity everywhere in the transfer portal this year. I would like to thank our Seminole Sidelines listeners for tuning in again this week. If you're not an Osceola subscriber, we would wish that you would go to theosceola.com, use the code FSU20 on the subscription page and the discount code field FSU20. Actually, we have another special going on right now, Jerry. What's the code for the Miami FSU 3128? You were running a promotion.
The promo code is 3128.
There you go. And that gets you how much off? 53%?
58%.
58%. So forget my code. Go code 3128 to get 58% off your annual subscription rate of $74.95. And listen, for that price, you don't need to join for just a month, just a year.
Yeah, it's good only until December 1st. Okay,
so go to the Osceola, go to the subscription page tab, go to the discount code field and put 3128 to receive 58% off our annual subscription rate of $74.95. We'd like to thank our Jerry, Bob, and Mark and Fish for joining me all season. It's been fun. It's been a lot funner than it was last year. And, of course, we'd like to thank Alumni Hall for sponsoring Seminole Sidelines, as they will continue to do. But we will be back next week to wrap up the 2021 season in its entirety and take a look ahead to recruiting and the transfer portal and how that may impact FSU moving into spring football. Thanks again for joining us. And Mark Salva, as always, we're going to let you sign us off.
Go Noles.
This has been another edition of the Osceola's Seminole Sidelines. To subscribe to the Osceola, go to theosceola.com. Go Noles.